Welcome to the Sacred Feminine Power podcast, where we explore the many facets of feminine power and why it is so important for women and for men to step into this power in our world at this time. This is Emmy from Feminine Revered, and I am so very excited to introduce today's guest, Sarah Poet. Sarah is a truth seeker, thought leader, and a medicine woman for modern times. It's Sarah's mission to assist women and men as we awaken to the imbalances of feminine and masculine, and to help bridge humanity from separation to connection. She's the host of the Sacred Remembering podcast and works to bolster women's sovereignty, inherent value, and prosperity through leading edge energetics in her work. Sarah directly serves couples, individuals, and organizations as a deeply healing coach and consultant. Welcome, Sarah. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you, Emmy. It's so good to be here and with everyone.
It is indeed. And I can't wait to see where our conversation takes us today. But since my podcast is called Sacred Feminine Power, I love to start by asking my guests, what does sacred feminine power mean to you personally?
Thank you. So, the tagline of the Sacred Remembering podcast is Women Standing in the Truth of Who We Are. So, I'll start there. The power to remember who we are, remember the truth of who we are fully, which is really something that never stops, on this reclamation journey. And continuing to learn more and more about the truth of who we are, um, which on the journey, it can be almost ego based at first. Like we have these ideas about what we want to reclaim or bring forward, and then there's more and more embodying of the actual soul code, of the actual wisdom that we're here to transmit to the planet. And the embodiment of that feels like power to me, a graceful power. It doesn't feel like power to me in my younger years. I had to kind of fight a lot. I was very resilient. There was a lot of trauma to overcome. And so I have all of these like black tattoos. They're flowers at least, but they're still black, right? So there was this kind of badass persona that I upheld through my previous career in educational leadership, and just it was like I was going to take on the world, but really that was coming from my nervous system. It was
Mm.
coming from um, like a survival power, right? Not necessarily a full-bodied power. And so I also like to define power as sovereignty. I'm very passionate about women's sovereignty, which I know that we'll go into the why in this conversation. But all the layers and levels of feminine energy. So we have our body sovereignty, our energetic sovereignty, our multidimensional sovereignty, our womb sovereignty. Um, and my path took me on a remembrance of the importance of that. So I believe our power returns to us as well as we reclaim our energy, reclaim our sovereignty from some of these things that have sought to, suppress the feminine or subvert or siphon feminine energy from women, from the womb, etc. So it's important that we name those things, that we are aware that they're there, right? Because I think that there can be, I know for me, there were times where it was like, why, what is taking my power? Why do I feel that, um, like, where is this stuff hiding? Why does it seem to, um, kind of return again and again to sort of zap my power? Like what are these forces? And so yes, that's been a lot of my path, is like looking in the nooks and crannies to see like what is taking feminine power.
Mm.
And how do we reclaim it truly?
Hmm. Yeah, that's such a beautiful way to really start off our podcast and to kind of lay the groundwork for our conversation to come. I think it is, as you say, so very important for us to understand the nuances of the kind of
Yeah.
power grabs and the power dynamics that are taking place on our planet, and a lot of which is indeed targeted at feminine power, at women, but feminine power overall. And I'm really looking forward to diving deeper into all of this with
Yeah.
you in just a moment. But I would love for you, Sarah, to share a little bit about your personal experience with this, and if you could share a challenge that has really helped you to activate sacred feminine power within you.
Yes, thank you for the invitation. And to listeners, I had asked Emmy's permission to share some of what I'm about to share before our podcast today. And I share what I share for the purpose of naming some of these things that are hard to name, that are taking feminine power, and that I've lived through. And sometimes by the time you've lived through some of this, you don't really want to have these conversations. It's almost like you'd prefer to just like live a happy life and walk the dog in the woods, and like so be it, right? But we really have to have these kinds of conversations so that we are bringing more awareness and inevitably more light and more of the feminine reclamation back to the planet. So I will start the focus of this story by saying that throughout my life, I grew up in America, in Pennsylvania, in the US, and like average middle class, family, and both of my parents worked. And I always had an inclination that I had been abused, sexually abused. And at the age of 16, sort of when I became interested in a boy, I had this flood of memories come back. And I actually told my mother, and the perpetrator was my father. And I told my mother, and she said, "Don't be silly. There is no way that that could have happened."
Hmm.
And so my family, this, working middle class, we had what we needed. There was a lot of emphasis on success, on, graduating, going to college, making something of yourself, that sort of thing. And and my father was very involved with the Christian church, the Methodist church. And he was the center of the family. And he had manic depressive episodes. He had, some personality disorder stuff. Now I know that that was caused by his own childhood trauma. And yet it was very dysfunctional. And the entire system, so it was my mother, I was the oldest of three daughters, and the entire system, there's a lot of feminine energy in the house, right? It all revolved around him.
Hmm.
And like this, false king of tyranny, sort of like whatever he was doing was how we were responding. So right there, the feminine orientation was to this false kind of disruptive masculine.
Hmm.
And my truth was, hidden. It was like, I mean, I'm a very emotional person. I'm an emotional projector in human design. And there was no room for the felt sense of anything, right? So I'm a feeler. I'm highly sensitive. Now I'm using all of these multi-sensory, skills in my work. But then there was just suppression of all of it. So I knew in my body that I was very afraid. I knew I held this perpetual um,
just way of managing the nervous system, managing my body. I was managing my body for the first 3 decades of my life, right? So over time, and as I became a mother, I owned more of my truth, and there was more distance from my family. The system itself and the dysfunction of the system itself held the system together. So to say, that I was the black sheep, that's exactly what it was, but I was the truth teller. I
Mm.
was the truth seeker. I was the one who was like, I couldn't be a part of the family if being a part of the family meant that I couldn't actually have the truth.
Mm.
And so it was, this is taking place over many years. And I, in my late 30s, early 40s, I was naming more. I was starting my podcast. I was very much distancing myself from my family. By the time I did my TEDx, which is on sacred feminine and sacred masculine, the story that I told in that TEDx, I knew that that would put further distance between me and my family. So there were these choice points along the way, like, am I going to own my truth and own my power essentially, you know, or am I going to acquiesce? And I just couldn't do that anymore.
Mm.
And then over time, I learned that it wasn't just the power of the family, it was actually this power of all of these dark forces. Because an aunt came forward from my father's side and told me that they had actually been raised in the SRA,
Mm.
which is the Satanic Ritual Abuse Cult,
Mm.
um, as children, probably for the first decade of my father's life.
Right.
And so, if you know anything at all about childhood trauma or trauma at all, it was the most severe trauma that you can have as a child and still be alive. I
Mhm.
mean, horrific, horrific things had happened. And on my spiritual path, I had already discovered what the SRA was, right? Because I was already on this path and I was asking really big questions like, why does patriarchy even exist? Why would there even be this imbalance in gender? Like, it doesn't even make sense that there would be a power imbalance because nature would never have that. Like, why? So when I started to ask these bigger questions, I started to get bigger answers. I was discovering like Ascension Glossary and the work of Lisa Renee, and I couldn't understand it because it was so far out there, but I was like, everything to me felt like truth, and it was like I had discovered something that was going to help me to decipher all of this. Um, and so from there, to make this longer story short, I'll say I was dealing with that, and all of this happened in conjunction with the first years in entrepreneurship, right? So I
Mm.
step out onto this path where I'm going to help women, I'm going to help the sacred feminine on the planet, and then all of this happens, right? Um, and then there was a really significant event a few years ago, and it caught me off guard because I thought that I was prepared for it. I thought that I had done enough years of trauma work. I thought that I had a huge toolkit. I knew about these things. And what happened was my sister got pregnant. And the soul of the child actually came to me before she got pregnant, and it was telling me that it was coming, and it was telling me that not only am I owning the truth now for me and for my children, keeping my children safe from this intergenerational pedophilia, these kinds of things, now we were going to end it for the lineage.
Mm.
And so this 5 months later, I find out that my sister is pregnant and the child is coming. And so long story shorter, I told. I wrote a letter and I sent it to everyone my generation and above, and I named it. And what happened after that was so unexpected, in that to say that I had a hard time would be an understatement. I received like interdimensional attack. My
Mm.
resources were attacked. My housing was attacked. Like the IRS, the tax system in the States that year withheld $5,000 and told me that my son wasn't my son. You know, these
Wow.
just like bizarre things that were like, but it was coming in so many directions. And that really opened up a new level of needing to really decipher, A, where were contracts made on my soul that I
Mm.
didn't consent to, right? Like I found out that it was through a channeled session, but I found out that my blood, my menstrual blood, had been offered
Mm.
in satanic ritual.
Right.
My first blood, right? So
Mm.
these were the things that I was discovering in this time period. And like, if we're discovering it, we're ready for it. But it was also like, I don't really know what to do with all of this. And so it was like, okay, intuition, how are we going to figure out how to undo blood curses and blood bindings with the satanic ritual? Like, this
Mm.
is things I never in my life thought that I would be like asking myself. But it's where my path took. So, or the direction that it took. So yeah, and that was just within the last like 2.5 years. Um, so I think that answers your question about the challenge. You're welcome to ask any questions that you have about any of that.
Well, thank you for sharing about that so openly and vulnerably, Sarah. I know it is not an easy topic to talk about, and it is also a topic that is quite a sensitive one on our
It
planet
is.
overall.
Right. And if I just may say something about that, I've had question about where and how to share these things. And people who know me personally and who know that I've walked this, and we know that this is a very, very important path on the planet, right? Like
Mm.
to really go through looking something like this in the face and choosing God's sovereign power,
Yeah.
right, it's I mean, I know that I've done this for the lineage. I know that I'm doing this for more than the lineage. As a woman, sometimes it just feels like, the hardship of daily life. Like it's not always glamorous by any means whatsoever. But, I went on a podcast not long after this letter and that few months, a few years ago, finding out about the blood curses. And I was talking about union and like the path to union, and how there are these traumas that we have endured. And the podcast actually got like a warning label, like,
Mm.
um, because it was like a love and light podcast.
Right.
And so if we mention the muck of trauma on the way to sovereign unity,
Mm.
sometimes that is like way too uncomfortable for people. So I just want to say thank you for like being willing to have real conversations, because when I was with some of this, no teacher, no spiritual teacher that I knew that was in this field was even coming close to talking about this. Like most of the women who were talking about feminine and masculine were still telling women that their power was going to come from how they relate to masculine.
Mm.
Like everything was about orienting to masculine. And I was trying to have these conversations about like interdimensional attack and the interdimensional forces that come through masculine. Nobody could even have that conversation. Like no
Right.
one could name it. And then I found Z Earth Star. She was
Mhm.
starting to have some conversations about the interdimensional attacks on the
Mhm.
womb. And I was
Yes.
like, finally, right? Because the story that I told you is the way short version, but this kept coming back with men that I would try to involve myself with in my life, and like this interference would come through the men. And then my womb would tell me, this happened twice. My womb told me, he doesn't have access to you anymore. He doesn't
Mm.
have access to your body anymore. Do not let him in,
Yeah.
right? Because he had been compromised, right?
Hmm.
So this, this is, all the ways we learn sovereignty because we have to,
Well,
you
that's
know?
the thing, absolutely. And the times that we're
Yeah.
living in on our planet right now are absolutely demanding of us to be in that sovereign power. And I'm not saying that's easy. On the contrary, it can be the most harrowing and most difficult of journeys, but it is so important right now for all of us to be so very careful in terms of who we let into our energy field, how we protect ourselves, and what we really do with our energy, with our vibration, and how we keep that high no matter what is going on. And I love your courage in talking about your experience with SRA and interdimensional attacks, because it is a big part of my work, not something that I have been very vocal about either until now. But clients who have experienced SRA in various forms are drawn to working with me, and clients who are being targeted with interdimensional attacks are drawn to working with me. And it just seems to be like, I'm drawn to working on the edge. I'm drawn to working with the battle between good and evil that's taking place on our planet and beyond. So it's just really
Yeah.
beautiful to have you on the show, Sarah, and have you talk about all of this so openly and
Mhm.
expose it to a bigger and bigger audience. Because, as you said, a lot of people shy away from it, either because it feels way too woo-woo or because it feels too scary, something that is not part of their immediate experience and therefore easy to brush under the carpet. But
Yeah.
really, in these times of change and transformation that we are in, this is what we need to face. We need to be aware of this, and we need to know what to
Absolutely.
do if this kind of stuff starts to happen, some on
Yeah.
some level at least, in our own lives.
Right. And to build the sovereignty of our own energetics,
Yeah.
and you'll hear me talk about the energetic architecture. Like our light body has an architecture, and it pairs with the architecture and the grid lines and the planet. And
Mm.
so I think I'm jumping the gun on what's probably your next question. But realizing some of this in tandem with the hardship that I was experiencing, I was like realizing the bigger and bigger and bigger why. But cultivating that sovereignty
Mm.
in our physical bodies and then in the layers of our energetic light body. And we're actually needing to rehabilitate the light body because we haven't known to do this. I don't
Yeah.
think like these are the awakening times. We're realizing this again. I see a lot of breakage. I guess it has to do with my soul history, but I see a lot of breakages in client sessions in the 10th, 11th, and 12th dimensional spaces in the architecture, which we know is affiliated with like the fall of Atlantis and
Mm.
Lemuria, like where we
Mm.
were really confused about, oh my gosh, what is this, division of power? Like we didn't even know it before then. It was like it wasn't even there until these forces like introduced it to the planet, and then our light body had incurred damage,
Mm.
like soul breakage,
Yeah.
really, that we can rehabilitate now. But again, the the remembering and the trusting of the remembering that we're all like we're having these little inklings and conversations like is this what's happening, and conversations like this, like going on the air and saying, yeah, this is what's happening. And we regain more and more of our collective power as we share.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you've talked a little bit about the hardships that you went through and the challenges that you faced. And at the same time, the hardships have the other polarity to them, which is the gift that they bring through as well. So, what for you has been the blessing in all that you've experienced and gone through?
Thank you. The blessing. There are many. Um, what I was just saying, the remembering, like I do see myself as a teacher, and that's what my first career was, and I still teach on my own podcast and in my own groups. And so there's this teacher aspect of my soul. So my remembering, then I can share, right?
Mm,
And the pieces that I have developed, I was very good at like living this journey and making tools for women. Like I would, like discover something and then I would make like either a program, or I have this workbook called Structure and Flow that helps with women's time and energy sovereignty. So as I was living this journey, it this is going to maybe sound funny, but I had like left education, I was reclaiming the feminine, and I was doing all of these really brave things, and it was kind of like a shock that just because I remembered didn't mean that anybody else remembered or respected what I had remembered, right?
mm,
So, but I was kind of naive about this. I was like, I've changed. I'm here. Um, but it was like, oh, maybe people or relationships don't quite know what I've remembered, or how to respect what I've remembered. They don't know how to
mm,
respect the feminine like this. So I started to kind of name like, what are the resources of the feminine that the world really wants? Maybe they take advantage of it. Maybe they know how to name it. Maybe they know how to honor it. But, maybe they don't.
mm,
So, like, one of these things is our time, right? Like, we have the hours in a day. As a woman, we can exchange that time for a value, like a monetary compensation, right? So somebody else might value us and show us with that compensation. But then we have these resources as women, like our womb, and the world doesn't know how to respect the womb,
mm,
right? Like my emotional intelligence, my gnosis, my wisdom, these feminine attributes that are the most valuable things that I have and possess and have cultivated again.
mm.
And yet, it's not up to the outside world to tell me the value of those. So I began talking about these 8 feminine resources. I made things. I made um, products. I made teachings. I'm still doing that. So that was one way that I was able to alchemize. Um, and then the other thing, and I love the timing of this podcast and the focus of the word power, because just recently, over my 44th birthday, which I love the number 44. I've been like waiting for this year, it feels like. And my friend wanted to offer me a ceremony where we were going to journey with plant medicine. And I had not done that since this very big, series of events a few years ago. And I was able to get in touch with this fear that I was like riding out life, not really recognizing this fear that was still very present, this fear that if I really am myself, or if I shine, or if I really get back up fully and bring my work forward in a different way, or write the book, or, those kinds of things, stepping into my path as I know that I am to do, I was afraid that it would attract this dark energy again and that something else bad would happen,
Mm.
because it was just this like series of like 18 months where just like crazy, it was very, very hard, because I had really regained my power over some covenants that I wasn't supposed to break.
Right.
These evil entities did not expect me to break them.
Mm.
And yet, on my sacred remembering path, on my reclamation path, I needed to. I
Mhm.
needed, like, you can't stay under those spells and have your own power, right? So, in the lead up to so of course I said yes to the ceremony because I was like, I need this. And that ended up being very beautiful. But in the lead up to that, I was able to go deep and recognize, and it's going to sound so basic when I say it, but my fear of the dark, or my fear of evil, these evil entities
Yeah.
that would stop me, it was synonymous with my fear of my own power.
Mm.
Not that my power is dark or evil, I'm not saying that, but that is the exact reason why they would hurt children,
Mm.
or they would do these really horrific things, right? Is because they're literally breaking someone's soul connection to their own power,
Right.
and like making you afraid of yourself, essentially.
Yeah.
And then they get to divert your creational power. They get to divert um, your life force as it feeds off of the fear that it produces in you, right?
Mm.
But I'm saying this today. I want to try to articulate that remembering our power is just so directly connected to creation itself,
Mm.
and to the womb itself, to the dark primordial material of creation.
That's right.
Yeah. And that is so powerful. It was so powerful. And if we are afraid, afraid of being ourselves, afraid of being attacked, afraid of running out of money, afraid of speaking our truth, it really is an invitation to get closer to our own innate power. Like, we just might be afraid of like how powerful we actually are. you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. Yeah, absolutely. And when you say connect with our innate power, it essentially is our own divinity. We are
Yes.
both drawn to and afraid of our own divinity because there's been
Yeah.
so much disconnection and so much polarization on our planet. And we literally have been programmed to forget that power, to forget that we are
Yeah.
divine. And our birthright is to completely, totally own that divinity and all the beauty
Yeah.
and mastery and power that comes with that.
Yeah.
And once you start to awaken to the literally these veils of illusion that have been placed around us, once you
Mhm.
awaken to that, it is both exhilarating and it is freaking scary at the same time because you realize just how much cover up there has been and
Mhm.
how tightly the so-called powers that be are needing to hold on to those veils of illusion to keep us from remembering.
Yeah. Yeah. And they are losing their grip. They're losing power, which is ultimately a good thing. And what I think we're seeing on the planet is a little kick up,
Mm.
right? Like, as more and more people awaken, as more and more women remember womb power,
Yeah.
you know, the, those powers that be are like, oh, the game is up for them. And we don't need to worry so much about what they're doing. We
Mm.
really need to focus on building our own sovereign power. Like if we only have so many hours or so much attention in a day, where we're really diverting that to like what matters and building what matters and remembering our power. Like, I mean, I'm sitting in meditation with the womb of creation more these days because I really want the codes, right? I
Mm.
really want this activation just to continue in
Yeah.
me. And that's like my job. That is the most important thing that I could be doing.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and some other things are falling away, and it's difficult. But another thing that I wanted to share here is the shift from, like, I talk about this a lot, like relying on our nervous system and almost like over relying on our nervous system. And thank goodness, thank you, nervous system. And it's one support. And so we have so many more supports. Like we have this multidimensional light body, we
Mm.
have the earth, like we have so many supports um, to really help us to like bolster and rejuvenate, regenerate our energy. And the more we do that, I'm just sharing this in case it is beneficial to any listeners. The more we do that, the more those false overlays that you were talking about just naturally fall away. Like they can't
Mm.
withstand that kind of power, that kind of
Mm.
energy. So, connecting with your source connection, connecting in so that that power, um, you'll start to just like recognize, oh, that thought that I thought for so long, that was false. That was an overlay. It can go now. Oh, that attachment that I had to that person is not
Mm.
real. It was like a false, something or other. It doesn't even matter, right?
Mm.
Like we don't need to deconstruct this stuff one story or even like one lifetime at a time anymore. It's like
Mm.
we're doing the big multidimensional work of the soul. Like we're just able to take care of so much at this point in time on the planet. It's so exciting.
It really is. Yeah. And noticing that in my own healing work as well, that work that used to in the past take a number of sessions can literally just disappear like that. And
Yes.
that's exciting. That's very, very exciting. But then, of course, leaving space for the work that will take a little bit longer as well,
Yeah.
and rejoicing in the stuff that can literally just very, very quickly be released and let go of.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
And trusting that that work is happening in that interdimensional space and then in the human space. It takes a minute to,
Mm.
kind of, oh, okay, I release that. Now I'll go through the emotional process. And then, it might be like a week or two for me, like, oh, okay, I'm really through that now. You know, oh, life is actually different now. Um, yeah. But
Yeah.
even a week or two for some of this is like great news.
Indeed.
That's even fast.
That is indeed
Yeah.
fast. Yeah, can be. Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful. Well, Sarah, I could listen to you for hours and continue chatting with
Thank
you
you.
for much, much longer. But I also want to make sure that our listeners have an opportunity to connect with you if they're resonating with what you're sharing. So, what is the
Yeah.
easiest place for them to find you at?
Thank you so much. My website would be the easiest place, and that is Sarah, Sarah, poet, poet.com. And that is the primary place that I go because my energetic system cannot always handle all of the social media platforms. I imagine that we're all moving away from that at some point in the future anyway. So I'm focusing at sarahpoet.com so you can sign up for my newsletter. And right now, My free gift on my website is actually it's an ebook, but it's about 22 pages. So it's like a small book about women's resources and really redefining what our resources are, and then redefining boundaries as energetic clarity so that we don't need to put up these defenses for our sovereignty. We just build this remembrance of who we are, and therefore the boundaries become really natural. So that ebook is available on my website as well for free at this moment.
Beautiful. Thank you for offering that gift to everyone and for sharing your work and yourself with the world in the way that you do. It's so very important right now, especially. And I was just wondering if there's anything else that's coming through for you in this moment that you feel would be really important to share with our listeners before we wrap up.
Yeah, thank you. Just before you asked that question, I was tuning in to those who might be out there listening. And I just want to say, like, maybe this episode was a shocker, or maybe, maybe you have some inklings or some experiences with silence, or someone else taking your power, or even taking your body without permission. And just really wanting to both send love to everyone that's listening, and then to encourage each and every woman that your energy and your power and your sovereignty matter so much. Like, there's nothing that needs to be swept under the rug. There's no silence that needs to be held. There's no um, inkling about what we're here to do that needs to be just ignored at this point. Like, we are really here, each and every woman, our sovereignty, our power pathway, our remembrance holds a piece of this for the whole. And I I knew that, I intuited that. And then the more I understood about the grids and our energy and how it works, like, the more power we reclaim, the more we're actually reclaiming it for. We're doing it with and for one another.
Yeah.
We're doing it with and for one another as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Sorry, my Wi-Fi just dropped there for a second, intriguingly, just as you were talking about claiming that power. But I hope I managed to capture all of that. And it's such an important message that the more we claim the power for ourselves, we're also doing it for those who came before us and for those who come after us. And we're clearing major collective trauma and wounding, ancestral, generational wounding as we do that. And yeah, to step into that power is just, it is what we need to do right now.
It is. And I, we don't have to heal for other people. It's like, this could be another topic altogether, but as we are just walking our walk, as we are reclaiming our power, it is having the ripples. Like, as women, we want to care for everyone. Like, we don't have to heal for everyone else. Like,
very true.
Just, our path is having ripples for the collective, for the evolution of the planet. So
yes,
yeah, it matters. Absolutely. And no one listening is alone on their journey at all.
Beautiful words, Sarah. Thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you for coming onto the show. I really appreciate you, and I'm so glad that our paths have connected. And thank you for all that you are and all that you do.
Thank you. You too, Emily. Thanks for all your holding down with this podcast.
Thank you. Beautiful. Well, everybody, just for a moment, let's bring our full awareness to this beautiful energy that's being activated and generated during this conversation. And remember that we are all truly one. And that the more of us have the courage to step into our power and, as Sarah says, reclaim and remember our sovereignty, the more quickly our planet will also heal and ascend. Thank you so much for tuning in and for listening. And thank you, Sarah, again.
Thank you.
Blessed be.